It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, counting the cost of the worst wildfires in California's history. 200,000 residents have been told to leave their homes. We'll speak to one of the Brits caught up in the chaos. Also tonight, NHS winter pressure as bad as at the height of the pandemic. Flu cases are soaring. 20 hospital trusts across the country have declared critical incidents. Have obesity levels in the UK reached their peak? We'll explain why rates could begin falling dramatically. The cold snap continues. Fresh warnings for ice and plummeting temperatures. We'll bring you the latest. And the Gavin and Stacey finale just keeps on giving. A gesture by one of its stars raising tens of thousands for charity. Stacey's brother, Jason, joins us in the studio. All that to come and much more on the UK Tonight. First tonight, an update for you on the wildfires tearing through Los Angeles, leaving at least 5 people dead. The latest information from authorities there say nearly 200,000 residents have now been ordered to evacuate their burning neighbourhoods. Authorities in LA say they hope that the tide is turning, as easing winds have allowed them to use planes to tackle the blazes. But officials say they are dealing with an evolving crisis, with the wildfires fuelled by a perfect storm. They expect the number of people killed to rise. Sky's David Blevins has this first report tonight from Los Angeles.
LA residents are waking up to news they didn't want to hear. More fires were sparked overnight. And from Hollywood's Walk of Fame, they watched. Flames spreading over the hills towards the city's most iconic landmarks. The worst fires in Palisades and Eaton, still raging out of control.
Today, we expect winds to subside somewhat, which will allow fire crews to increase containment lines. However, and I want to be very clear here as well, we are still under red flag warning with extreme fire behavior possibilities.
There's no respite for the residents of Altadena, a northern suburb of the city. Fire department resources are stretched to the limit here, and residents' attempts to save their property appear futile.
It would be difficult to find the right words to describe the sense of desperation that there is right now, but I don't really need the words because the pictures speak for themselves. You're watching in real time the challenges that the Los Angeles Fire Department is facing on many fronts.
There were desperate efforts being made to retrieve belongings. Those who had waited in hope now conceding to the evacuation order.
Well, we have just driven into the evacuation zone here, right on the edge of the Eaton fire, and the scenes are truly apocalyptic. On every street corner there are bright orange flames, and this is a tragic reality for the people who lived on these streets, who drove these cars, who owned businesses here.
The charred remains of electricity poles, power cables dangling precariously. Firefighters already exhausted face real danger. There's a political battle raging too. Questions about how such an iconic city could apparently be so unprepared. The president-elect blaming local Democrats.
This is a true tragedy, and it's a mistake of the governor, and you could say the administration. They don't have any water. They didn't have water in the fire hydrants. They don't have water. So what's happened is a tragedy, and the governor has not done a good job.
There's also anger at the LA mayor. We caught up with her returning from a trip to Ghana, to her city on fire. Fire chiefs say that they're really stretched to the limit and running out of water. What have you got to say to that? Have you no response to that? Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today? Over 7,500 emergency personnel have been deployed, but this is an unpredictable race against time and nature. David Blevins, Sky News in Los Angeles.
Well, some breaking news to bring you now on those wildfires in LA. Sky News has seen the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, who's come under increasing scrutiny over what's happening there. He's been confronted by an angry LA resident. We can take a listen to their exchange.
Governor, you got a second? Governor, I live here, Governor. That was my daughter's school, Governor. Please tell me what you're going to do. I'm not going to hurt him, I promise.
I'm literally talking to the president right now to specifically answer the question of what we can do for you and your daughter.
Can I hear it? Can I hear your call? Because I don't believe it.
I'm sorry. There's literally, I've tried 5 times. That's why I'm walking around to make the call.
Why is the president not taking your call?
Because it's not going through. So
Why?
I have to get cell service.
So
There's
let's
no
get
cell
it.
service.
Let's get it. I want to be here when you call the president.
I appreciate it. I'm doing that right now. And it's to immediately get reimbursements, individual assistance, and to help you. I'm devastated for you. I'm so sorry, especially for your daughter. I have 4 kids. Losing the school.
Everyone who went to school there, they lost their homes. They lost 2 homes because they were living in one and building another. Governor, please tell me, what are you going to do with the president right now?
We're getting the resources to help rebuild.
Why was there no water in the hydrants, Governor?
That's all literally.
Is it going to be different next time?
It has to be. Has to be. Of course.
What are you going to do?
I'm doing
To
everything
fill the
I can.
hydrants. I would fill them up personally, you know that.
I literally have.
I would fill up the hydrants myself.
I understand.
But would you do that?
I would do whatever I can.
But you're not. I see do you know there's water dripping over there, Governor? There's water coming out there. You can use it.
I appreciate it. I'm going to make the call to address everything I can right now, including making sure people
I'd
are
like
safe.
to make sure you do. Can I have an opportunity to at least tell people you're doing what you're saying you're doing? Could somebody have a contact? Can I have your contact information?
Right there.
Thank you.
Well, utter desperation and frustration in that woman's voice. You could hear it there, looking for answers, and none seemingly so far to be found. Let's go live to the States now. We can speak to the British journalist who's based there, Eve Barlow. Eve has been forced to evacuate her home in LA. Eve, first of all, how are you? Are you safe? What's happened over the last 24 hours?
Yeah, I'm thankfully extremely grateful to be safe, to be well clear of the LA area. I've taken refuge out here in Palm Springs. There are a lot of Angelinos in every single hotel and Airbnb out here, out in the desert, in various different communities and cities outside of LA. A lot of people have had to evacuate, or in my case, I got caught up in the 4th fire that broke out on Sunset above Runyon Canyon last night at about 6 p.m., which took out evacuation orders all along Laurel Canyon and Mulholland Drive and down Hollywood Boulevard. And that was the moment when it was so central to LA and so unthinkable, and something I never conceived I would see in my life, that I thought, okay, it's time to pack bags, take as much stuff as I can and can fit into suitcases out before there is even more gridlock and even less options of safe places to go. But, you know, thankfully, I'm okay right now. And, you know, I'm fortunate that I managed to get a night's rest last night because I wasn't affected by the winds in LA and just the permanent anxiety as the vastly, rapidly growing and ever-changing situation that we've been experiencing for the last 48 to 72 hours. But my heart is utterly shattered. So many of my friends have completely lost their homes. And it's not just that the homes have gone, entire communities gone. It is going to take the city an unbelievable amount of effort and community and togetherness to be able to push past this after the rest of the damage is done. I don't know if we've seen it yet. There's no clarity about the situation easing up at all. I brought a friend out here. I literally grabbed someone that lives in the center of Hollywood who I knew would need a place to go. Everyone that I know is trying to help anyone that they know that might need help in any way possible. To be a community and try to get through this together. But utterly devastating in the clip that we just saw, that the anger making of this situation, the frustration with the lack of leadership, it's everything. It's all of the emotions at once.
Eve, we were just looking at some really dramatic footage above Runyon Canyon, which, you know, for tourists who've visited LA, they will know that because it's a popular hiking trail for dog walks. You know, people know Runyon Canyon, and it is literally ablaze. It looks like a scene from a movie, the kind of movies that LA make. What is it like to be confronted with that on your doorstep? Because the images that we are seeing here are jaw-dropping. I wonder what it's like to see them in real time.
It's completely terrifying. It's, you know, the beginning of my experience of these fires was one of my best friends calling me on FaceTime on the 405 freeway from Pacific Palisades, where she lives, and had to flee her home with 10 minutes to spare. And on a FaceTime on the 405, in gridlock traffic for 7 hours, not knowing if she was driving in the right direction away from safety, with billowing smoke and fire in the background of her rear view, her rear window of the car. I mean, it's like living inside a disaster movie. And I panic left last night after kind of sitting and waiting and feeling like I didn't quite need to evacuate because my area, fortunately, is not affected specifically by fire. But to tell you that I woke up yesterday morning and my morning light there was no light. First of all, it was black. Morning light outside my window was just this apocalyptic view of ash and big, thick plumes of smoke that had covered the entire sky with a bright orange yellow sun. And the air quality is disastrous. The smoke, the smell of smoke in all of the buildings, and the fear and the paranoia that kicks in, because you know that in these chaotic circumstances, when we don't have proper leaders to come forward and, you know, give a semblance of things being under control, in erratic ways, the roads get jammed. The reports of looting are abominable. I mean, that people can be going into burning places and looting homes that have been abandoned and are still standing. You know, it's just it's an out of control situation. Seeing the smoke billowing down Sunset Boulevard last night when the fire started at Runyon, I came out of a gym class to see that was happening, and immediately ran back into my gym and told the front desk that they needed to close the gym for the evening, which they immediately did, and that everyone needed to evacuate. And I, you know, checking that everyone that we know has a place to go. Do they need to come with me? Because I can take as many people as I can fit in a car. You know, it's the stuff that it really is. It's the stuff that you see in these disaster movies playing out in real life. It's devastating and frightening.
Yeah, devastating and frightening in equal measure. Eve, you touched on that vacuum of leadership that the people in Los Angeles feel is palpable. How is the community stepping in to fill that vacuum and provide for each other? Because I just know, looking on social media today, you know, you feel like you're 1 degree of separation from somebody in LA because of social media, and all the appeals are being put out, whether it's, you know, people taking in abandoned pets, whether it's people opening up the doors of their home, whether it's community kitchens saying, we're going to take food to firefighters because they haven't eaten for 24 hours. All of that. Can you give me an idea of what's coming together in the face of a void, it seems, from local leaders?
Totally. I mean, that's all the case, is that the community itself are so strong and will do everything that they can. You know, there's a Jewish centre up in Pasadena that has been open since all of this started, where people are welcome to meals, take refuge, to just sit in place, that I'm aware of and connected to. That children have been coming in just to, you know, take respite, to be calmed down, because a lot of children are obviously very, very distressed, watching their parents distressed, the amount of buildings that have been lost, structures been lost, and people who are wondering if they're losing their homes has had a very palpable endemic stress effect on everyone in the city, and the kids are very unsettled. But yeah, I've got friends that own restaurants that have, they're providing free meals for all of the first responders to come through when they can take a break, or to go directly to areas where it's safe to drop food off for them. Per usual on social media, the calls for essentials to be dropped at certain pickup points for people who have had to flee and have nothing, and need just basic essentials. And then, in a greater way, it's just LA is a city full of artists and entertainers and people who are, like self-starters and go-getters, and we all rely on each other all the time. So it's just a lot of texts between friends and families, just trying to make sure that everyone's safe, the vast majority of people I know have either evacuated to other areas in the city or they have evacuated out of LA completely. And it's a lot of people just trying to figure out house shares, Airbnbs, hotel rooms, just in the same way that I grabbed a friend that I knew would need help. That's just what everyone's doing, is trying to make sure that, we're not just looking after ourselves, we're also looking after each other in every way possible.
Well, listen, Eve, stay safe. Thank you so much for talking to us here on Sky News. I mean, LA is right in the thick of it. It shows no sign of slowing down or stopping just yet. We will continue to cover this story here on Sky News, and we really thank you for your time. Best of luck, Eve. Thank you. Well, let's bring you some more breaking news now. The Prime Minister hosting the French President, Emmanuel Macron. He's hosting him at Chequers for dinner tonight, welcoming the French President, the second world leader to meet Sir Keir Starmer at the Prime Minister's country retreat. He said this: can I just thank you for taking the time? I know there's a lot going on to come here for this discussion. Really important discussions about a number of issues of concern. Sir Keir Starmer saying that the pair plan to discuss Ukraine, the situation in the Middle East, saying that this meeting was further evidence of their ability to work well together. Emmanuel Macron echoing Sir Keir's comments, saying that he looked forward to discussing EU-UK relations and the main crisis in Ukraine, as well as bilateral relations between France and the UK. So that is a dinner happening between the French President and the Prime Minister at Chequers this evening. The number of patients in hospital with flu is on the rise, as we reported last night. Staff themselves are reporting being under the same kind of pressure as at the height of the COVID pandemic. The total number of A&E attendances last year hit 27.4 million, with more than 2 million in December alone. Around 20 NHS trusts have declared critical incidents, saying that their services are increasingly stretched. Our health correspondent Ashish Joshi has more on this.
Last week, more than 5,400 beds on average every day were taken up with flu and COVID patients. That's up 21%, although you can see that these numbers did start to drop off slightly, suggesting, hopefully, we may have reached a peak. But when we compare that to last year, you can see there's almost a staggering 250% increase in the number of patients with winter viruses. But if we take the data back one more year to 2022-23, we can see that the hospitals are facing roughly around the same number of patients. I spoke to one trust chief executive who said there was no more slack left in the system.
Ward occupancy at the moment is running around 99% of our beds, so we are absolutely full. Our respiratory unit, half of it has been given over for patients with flu, and we've got a lot of very kind of unwell patients in the hospital at the moment. And each morning over the last few days, we've actually been starting the day with around another 20 to 30 patients actually in the emergency department waiting for beds. So the bed pressures have been really significant.
And those warnings are seen in the national targets that are being missed. The NHS aims for 95% of patients to be seen, treated or discharged within 4 hours of coming into the emergency department. But in December, it was a little over half that target. And of the patients that were due to be admitted, some 28% waited for 4 hours before they were actually seen. And that's also worse than at this time last year. Another target being missed is the one for 95% of patients to be handed over from ambulances to hospitals within half an hour. The mean time last week was almost 54 minutes. That's the orange line here, more than 20 minutes slower than at this time last year. Every delay puts patient safety at risk, and while the number of patients with seasonal viruses looks to have peaked for now, there are concerns that the cold weather and with schools reopening, it could cause a further surge and add even more pressure to the NHS.
Well, levels of obesity in the UK may now have reached their peak, and we could see rates start falling rapidly this year. According to one of the biggest sellers of weight loss jabs, that's down to an increased demand, with 500,000 people currently taking the medication. Most patients are buying the drugs privately, though, because of limited access via the NHS. Our science and medical correspondent Thomas Moore explains.
Paul and Angela are now far from obese. Since starting weekly injections of a drug called Mounjaro, they have lost several stone.
I think this is the last dose on this one.
Paul is no longer on the cusp of needing diabetes medication, and the agonising abdominal cramps Angela had suffered several times a week as the extra pounds tugged at scar tissue from previous stomach surgery have all but ceased. But the transformation in their health has cost them around £300 a month because the NHS wouldn't fund them.
It was very frustrating to be told no, and especially from the medical professionals, come and live in my shoes and see how it affects me, and then tell me I'm not worth the money investing in.
If we can stay healthy for longer, and it's our weight that dictates how healthy we are, then it's definitely worth it.
Many others are making the same calculation. This online pharmacy had to build a walk-in fridge just for weight loss jabs, but this stock will last only a few days. They prescribe to 400 patients an hour.
The narrative has really shifted in the last few months. People are recognising obesity as a lifelong chronic condition. I think people are really changing their attitudes towards it, and I expect that from next year onwards we're going to see another huge surge in growth.
According to the pharmacy, 500,000 patients in the UK are currently using Mounjaro or Wegovy privately, losing, on average, enough weight over 6 months to no longer be classed as obese. On current trends, that means by the end of next year, 1.5 million adults will have reversed their obesity.
Tantalisingly, we could be at peak obesity in Britain. So many people are now taking effective weight loss drugs that rates could soon begin to decline.
That's despite the slow rollout on the NHS. Sarah is a patient representative advising NICE, the NHS cost-effectiveness watchdog. It's recommended much wider access to the jabs, but that would need ring-fenced money from the government.
What concerns me is that we're going to have this tiered approach of, like, the wealthy can be healthy, but actually, you know, the people that really need it can't. It's not the NHS's fault that they can't suddenly fund these drugs. They can't take it from cancer and say, OK, we'll put it into obesity, and this is the problem.
Angela's just had good news. Her abdominal pain is so much better because of the jabs that the NHS has agreed to pick up the tab. But for most people with obesity, access to effective treatment is still based on the ability to pay.
Well, Thomas is here with me in the studio, and Thomas, it's worth reflecting on the fact that this is pretty significant. Obesity levels could start dropping off this year. We're not talking about 3, 5, 10 years' time. 2025.
That's what they reckon from the evidence that they're looking at. And there are 15 million people, adults, living with obesity in the UK. Now, if 1 million of those do reduce their level, their weight, so it's no longer obese, then you can see why across the population that rates would begin to drop. And they have been increasing for decades, so they've almost doubled since the early 1990s. About 27–28% of adults are now living with obesity. So this is huge for the population and, of course, for the NHS.
Yeah, potentially really good news for the NHS. We talk a lot about, you know, how much of their budget is taken up by treating the diseases and illnesses that are sort of linked to obesity. This is being seen by a lot of people as a quick fix, though. You touched on it in your report there. People getting this privately rather than going on the NHS because perhaps they don't meet the criteria. I think the BMI you have to have is 35. Is this... You're meant to be on it for a short time, make the lifestyle adjustments, then come off it and keep up those good habits. Is there a danger that this is actually going to be a lifestyle choice for people to stay on this drug long term? And do we know what that would mean?
There has been some evidence that shows you can stay on them for a number of years without significantly increasing the risks, but you do maintain those benefits. So the weight stays off. It doesn't continue to slip away because your metabolism does adjust to some extent to these drugs. So there's two schools of thoughts. Yes, you could take these for life, just as you do with blood pressure drugs or statins or anything like that. Get those health benefits. But there are also those who would advocate, well, while you're on these drugs for, say, 6 months, which is where you get the primary benefit, if you can reset your lifestyle, stop those bad habits that put you in that position, start to walk instead of taking the car, get rid of the ultra-processed food, all that kind of stuff, then you might stand a better chance of maintaining that weight loss in the longer term. And that is the hope. Maybe we need to stop arguing over whether these drugs are good or bad and see them as an opportunity for resetting our weight for the population.
OK, Thomas, thank you. Thomas Moore there talking to us about weight loss drugs. We're going to speak to someone now who has welcomed this move to increase access to the jabs. Of course, only a limited number of people are able to access it on the NHS. She started Mounjaro last year. She is Alex, and she says it has totally changed her life. Alex Harvey, welcome to the UK Tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Thomas Moore there talking about the opportunity this presents for individuals and the UK population as a whole, because we are an obese nation. That could change as soon as this year. How has it changed your life?
I mean, exactly what Thomas has said is that I took this drug for 6 months and I'm in a very privileged position. I've known how to eat healthily. I have the ability to, buy gym membership and have the free time to kind of do that. And I was able to kind of maintain my weight within a kind of healthy range, although potentially at the sort of slightly higher end of the sort of BMI scale for a number of years. After having my second child, that just kind of went out the window, whether that's sort of purely down to metabolism or lifestyle. And 2024, so this was me this time last year, I kind of said, actually, this is a repeated problem. It's really starting to affect my health. I can't run. I'm sluggish all the time. I'm always tired. My joints hurt, and I actually really have to do something about it. Tried with sort of traditional diet methods for around 3 months, and it didn't work. For the first time in my life, I just couldn't shift that weight, and I thought I really do have to try something drastic now, because if this pattern of continuing to put weight on continues, I'm going to be in a really, really bad state in my kind of late 30s and 40s and 50s. And so I came across Mounjaro, very lucky to have connections to someone who was actually part of one of the original kind of Ozempic trials over in the US. And so I had some insight into kind of how they work and the experience of this friend who was on these medications, and thought it's worth giving it a go. It is expensive, but if it works, it's worth giving it a go. And it totally revolutionized the process of losing weight. It's as close to a miracle drug, I think, as people are going to get, because not only does it make you feel kind of full and kind of stop these cravings, improve your body's sort of sensitivity to insulin, it also cuts a lot of this kind of food noise, this kind of drive that you have in the back of your head going, oh, don't you just want a piece of cake? Really, it wouldn't be the best thing ever. And you just can't let go and can't stop thinking about it. And it cuts all of that. And suddenly all this motivation that you've had all along to lose weight and enact those healthy choices are suddenly really, really easy. And so it allows people to suddenly lose that weight over a course of a couple of months. And once it's gone, the motivation to keep it off and to keep those healthy choices, and to keep that kind of lifestyle change going is much, much higher. So I totally agree with what Thomas said.
Yeah, like you said, it's a medical injection, but it's, almost giving you willpower, which you can't inject, but, it's the motivation you need to lose the weight, because let's face it, if we try and do it the traditional ways, it can be demotivating because it doesn't come off very quickly, but you're actually seeing results. Are you still on it, or have you come off it now after the recommended 6-month period? And what's that been like?
I'm still on it. I've got the kind of remainder of a pen left, so I decided that I'll kind of finish that off. And so I think I found very sort of typical pattern where I lost a very sort of large amount of weight, particularly in the beginning, and then that kind of tapered off like slowly as the time went down. And I lost. Are you
tempted to stay on it? Because I was just discussing that with Thomas Moore there, in terms of, we know it's meant to be a kickstart, isn't it? You're meant to, while you're losing the weight, you're meant to reprogram yourself to make all those healthy choices, do the exercise so when you stop the jab, all that is in place so you can sustain that weight loss. But it must be so tempting to think, do you know what, I might just stay on this.
I'm a scientist. I'm a biologist, marine biologist is my background. So I do a lot of reading of kind of research papers to support my kind of choices, and this was no exception. I think the issue surrounding Mounjaro at the moment is the jury's kind of still out. The research is still out into whether this is going to have to be a lifelong drug for some people, and whether it will be safe for them to continue that in long term, or if it is sufficient to give that people that boost to get them to lose that weight, and whether they can then maintain that weight off. Now, it's definitely possible. I know people that have lost, several stone and maintained the weight that they've lost, but they've really had to kind of support that with dietitians, with very significant kind of exercise programs, and that's not necessarily feasible for everybody. It is an expensive drug to begin with, and then for people to kind of be in a position where they can also support themselves is quite difficult. And I think that's where the NHS and potentially they're taking quite a tiered approach to actually roll out slowly in order to have that support for patients when they come off it. So I don't want to stay on it myself. I would like to see how well I can get on without it, but I can absolutely see why for some people they really do think this needs to be kind of a more longer term solution.
Oh, well, listen, Alex, really good to have your insight into this and your experience of taking Mounjaro, just one of the weight loss drugs available to people now, either on the NHS or privately. That's Alex Harvey there, and good luck with the rest of your journey.
Thank you.
Esther's come on the UK tonight. Once the rugby captain for Scotland today, narrowly avoiding jail. We'll have more on the sentencing of Stuart Hogg. Also ahead, fresh snow and ice warnings right across the country. Temperatures expected to plummet even further overnight. And what's occurring? A script signed by the stars of Gavin and Stacey, raising nearly £40,000 at a charity raffle. That's what's occurring.
Paris reverberated to the sights, sounds and smells of conflict.
There's a focal point to all this anger, and that is Emmanuel Macron.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
There are dozens of people desperately clambering to get onto that boat. It is a chaotic scene, but it's being watched by dozens of French police officers on the beach.
I've reported on migration across Europe, close up on the ground, understanding that sense of desperation and meeting the criminal gangs behind it.
This old fishing boat set off from the Libyan port of Tobruk. There were 606 people who were on board.
So we've been distributing life jackets to all the people on board this boat, and now the first person is coming on board.
This is the ugly side of Italian football.
In Italy, everything is really organized.
Football's problems with hooliganism, racism were just dormant, and now they're back and they're getting worse.
We cover so many countries, languages and cultures and work hard to gain trust to bring you the full story first.
Help is slowly reaching these places.
It's not just homes, but whole streets like this one that have been reduced to rubble and dust.
This is a picture of destruction.
Everywhere you look in this mountaintop community, there is absolute devastation.
These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again.
Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
The former Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, has today apologised to the families of Lucy Letby's victims, saying he was sorry for anything that didn't happen that night that might have prevented her crimes. He's been giving evidence to the Thirlwell inquiry, which is examining how the former nurse was able to murder babies on a neonatal unit in Chester in 2015 and 16. Our correspondent, Katerina Vitozzi, was at the inquiry and sent this update.
Jeremy Hunt, the former Health Secretary and now backbench MP, gave over 2 hours of evidence to the Thirlwall inquiry here at Liverpool Town Hall. But perhaps for families, as well as for those sitting within the inquiry room itself, the most striking moments came within the first few minutes, where he offered a very frank and robust apology to the families of Lucy Letby's victims.
It happened on my watch as Health Secretary, and that although you don't bear direct personal responsibility for everything that happens in every ward in the NHS, you do have ultimate responsibility for the NHS. I do bear ultimate responsibility, and I want to put on record my apology to the families for anything that didn't happen that could potentially have prevented such an appalling crime.
And I think the key words to pick out from what Jeremy Hunt said within that apology are accountability and responsibility, because whilst also looking at what Lucy Letby did at the Countess of Chester Hospital, this inquiry will examine more broadly the culture within the NHS that existed at that time. So Mr. Hunt faced questions about why recommendations made to change things within the NHS took such a long time to implement, not only when he was Health Secretary, but in subsequent administrations too. One in particular was about independent medical examiners, a recommendation that had been made in the early 2000s after the inquiry into the deaths and murders of Dr. Harold Shipman. Mr. Hunt said it was a question of cost and also of logistics, but it was something that he did indeed recommend and try and push through, although it took nearly 15 years after it was first recommended. And why independent medical examiners are being particularly referred to in this case is because it was described, or it was examined, whether if their existence may have meant that the pattern of Lucy Letby's offending could have been detected any earlier. Mr. Hunt also said that he believed NHS targets more broadly should be scrapped. He even used the word dismantled. As he said, he felt targets left hospital bosses trying to please managers rather than focus on patients and their families. The Thirlwall inquiry has been going for many, many weeks now. There have been many, many days of evidence from people who worked at the hospital. But Jeremy Hunt, as Health Secretary at that time, as you heard, saying that he was sorry, that he felt that his position meant he did bear ultimate responsibility and accountability for what happened at the Countess of Chester.
Now, he was once the rugby captain for Scotland, but today he narrowly avoided jail. Stuart Hogg has been found guilty of abusing his estranged wife over the course of 5 years. The 32-year-old has been handed a community payback and non-harassment order. He admitted shouting and swearing, tracking his ex-wife's movements on his phone and sending her distressing messages. Our Scotland correspondent Conor Gillies tried to speak to him as he left court today.
Mr. Hogg, do you have any regret for the way you behaved? Do you think you got away with this because you were a rugby star? Do you have any regret for apology?
So to come here on the UK Tonight, we'll be speaking to the head teacher in Yorkshire who's had to close the school gates for a week because of the heavy snow. Large parts of the UK are still facing disruption caused by this cold snap. Temperatures expected to fall as low as -16 degrees Celsius tonight, both in the northeast of England and in Scotland. There are a number of yellow weather warnings in place right across the country. But I'm joined now by Desmond Dehan, a head teacher whose school in Halifax has been closed this week because of the snow. So day 4 of closure and counting. You're going to be closed tomorrow, Desmond?
Yes, we're closed now for the rest of the week, for Thursday and Friday.
So this is the first week back at school, isn't it? And I just wonder how much disruption this is causing for the children, of course. Wonderful, get to go and play in the snow or whatever. Not so much for their parents, I would imagine, who have got work to get back to themselves. But what's the effect of what's happening this week for you?
Well, I mean, effectively, we were closed Monday and Tuesday initially because of the snow, and then we opened Wednesday. Students were very keen to get back into school and made a real effort to get in. But unfortunately, only just over half of the students were able to make it into the school, and about a quarter of the staff were unable to make it in. So we've had to close again for today and tomorrow. On average, generally, the students want to be in school at this particular point, and we want them to be there as well. So it's really reluctantly that we have to end up closing the school again, and it is disruptive to their learning.
Yeah, the novelty of snow soon wears off, and of course they've had, some pupils 4 weeks off over the Christmas holidays. And as you said, if some can make it in and some can't, it becomes disjointed. That's no good for, the teachers' plans. So what plans do you have in place? Because the thought would be schools were closed for so long during the pandemic that remote learning became something we all knew about, parents, pupils, teachers. Is it something that you can reinvigorate and sort of pull out of the toolbox for when eventualities like this happen? Or is it actually quite difficult to do?
Yeah, to some extent, yes. COVID gave us the advantage of having done a real trial run of this. So we do have online learning available. We do use it to support homework as well. So students have got quite used to that, which is an important aspect. It's not entirely new. But each time it requires a degree of work for teachers to set up resources for the particular lessons that they're going to be missed because they don't know when this is going to happen. So although it's the infrastructure is there for it, it's not a case of just pressing a button and it all runs automatically. The teachers still have to prepare all of that work for it. And it's not a substitute for live teaching in a classroom and interacting and being there with your peers. It is a short-term measure and not one we can rely on longer term.
And you do think you can cope for a week, but actually for some pupils, it's a real loss, it's a real hit to take in their education programme. I'm thinking about vulnerable children, I'm talking about the neurodiverse, those with, special needs learning-wise. What's the impact there? I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot, does it, 5 days?
You're absolutely right. I mean, every day counts and is significant. But having said that, there are some students who will need that structure even more than others. And you've mentioned neurodiverse students, for instance, for whom that structure and routine is really important. And the longer they're out of that, the bigger the impact it has. We know from COVID, from the absence from school as a result of that, the impact that had on wider student bodies in terms of routines and structures and how important that was. So each day does matter, particularly in this circumstance, coming after a 2-week break for the Christmas holidays as well.
Well, listen, milder temperatures ahead for the weekend. I'm reliably informed, so fingers crossed you can get back to school, all of you, on Monday. And of course, the kids will want to get back on school because they'll say, we saw Mr. Dehan on the telly. They want to talk to you about it.
Well, hopefully, they might be working. Maybe they're still doing homework right now.
Oh, that's wishful thinking, isn't it? OK, Desmond Dehan, head teacher at North Halifax Grammar School. Really good to talk to you about how the weather's been affecting your school, closing it all week this week. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Still to come on the UK tonight, the Gavin and Stacey finale just keeps on giving. We're going to be joined by one of the stars of the show to find out how their script helped raise thousands of pounds for charity. And coming up at the sport, there's been a hiring and a firing in the Premier League today. We'll tell you all you need to know next.
Two clubs separated by a 3.5-mile stretch of urban North London. The North London
derby occupies centre stage. And that's a beautiful finish. The circle, that's just stunning.
The North London derby, only on Peacock.
We've come to one of Moscow's Cold War bunkers. It was built as a top-secret command centre.
Being here really feels like you're stepping back in time. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
A show of military might and menace.
Courage, bravery and sacrifice will win the day.
It's a new subject. They'll learn about combat drones and some how to handle a Kalashnikov.
The Kremlin continues to put forward its own version of events, both present and past.
There's no mention of the fact that Russia invaded its neighbour. That's rewriting history, isn't it?
Now we are to read it carefully.
Vladimir Putin put forward his plan for a ceasefire in Ukraine, telling Kiev, pull out of your eastern territories and the war will end. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Vladimir Putin is already the Kremlin's longest-serving leader since Stalin. The question is, what will a fifth Putin term mean for Russia and the world? Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Segal?
I can't answer questions that stupid.
I've watched Vladimir Putin attempt to create a new world order.
The St. Petersburg Economic Forum was the backdrop to Vladimir Putin's latest verbal volley that Russia could send missiles to other nations to target the West.
Ambassador, I wonder, shall we have a quick word for Sky News?
Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine?
Swedish media, oh my God, you're not afraid of being here.
American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display.
Russia says Evan Gershkovich was caught red-handed, but has never produced any evidence to back that up. Sky News. Get the full story first.
Now, are you, like all the Gavin and Stacey fans out there, desperate to know what really happened on that fishing trip? Well, stay with us because actor Robert Wilfort, aka Jason West, Stacey's brother, is going to be in the studio shortly. David is here.
Oh my goodness, that is...
I know, you want to know, don't you?
I went to Barry over New Year. We were in Wales, and on the way back, my wife and I and the kids said, let's just pop into Barry Island.
Oh, why not?
Yeah. So I'm so in for that.
Okay.
Like, Flynn, let's go.
OK, well, I'm going to try and find out. Can't promise anything. But anyway, we're talking about hiring and firing. Let's start with the firing first. The sacking in the Premier League. What's happened?
Yeah, it's Everton. Sean Dyche has gone after 2 years in charge at Goodison Park. 1 win in 11, hadn't scored in 8 of their last 10. That decision isn't surprising. The timing is very surprising. Everton playing Peterborough tonight in an FA Cup tie, leading by a goal to 0 right now in the third round. But this happened 3 hours before kickoff. Sean Dyche had already picked the team for the game. Leighton Baines and Seamus Coleman are overseeing that one tonight. They only found out at that time as well. The freaking group of the owners of Everton. It's really brutal. And they decided to make this move. And one of the main reasons is because they're moving to a new stadium next season, Bramley Moor Dock. Everton are 16th in the Premier League. They do not want to be playing Championship football in that stadium first up. So, yes, Sean Dyche has gone, and we'll see who replaces him.
OK, the hiring bit, that's at West Ham.
That's right, yeah. So it is Graham Potter. Worst kept secret, really, over the last 72 hours. Julian Lopetegui left yesterday. His coaching staff departing with him. Graham Potter had already agreed a contract. He is now coming. He said it's like Christmas for the adults. Graham, I don't know, but for me, Christmas for the adults is Christmas. But in any case, West Ham play Aston Villa in the FA Cup, and then they've got 5 out of their first 6 games of London derbies, including a trip back to Chelsea. So it should be very interesting to see how he fares. OK, so that is as far as the managerial merry-go-round is concerned. But as I mentioned, FA Cup action to tell you about as well.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
I'm striving to find out how our Games Academy system works. I've heard from the very best managers.
20 years ago, if you had talent, you could be at the top, but now it's not enough.
I've heard from the very best players.
You get your first contract when you're, what, 8, 9? Year on year, you're fighting for a contract.
I've heard from those who've had their dreams shattered.
I'm so out of love with it, I don't want to be here.
Coming up in this episode, I'll find out exactly how the system works.
The 2 biggest periods of success in Manchester United's history have been driven by young academy players.
The way we do things
maybe slightly different, predominantly because we've been doing it longer than anyone else. Our youth program's 90 years old, and we're trying to build a program that sees the boys reach their full potential. Ultimately, you know, the utopia is we want to support players to go and play in our first team, and we've been brilliant at that over the years.
The relationship that the academy have with the first team, with the manager, with the director of football, chief executive.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Time for a quick look at the weather. The cold theme continuing for many, but milder air will move in to the west this weekend. Before then, most places looking cold and dry to end today, but exposed northern coast will see wintry showers, especially northern Scotland. The breezy North Sea coast will be at risk as well. Another sharp frost developing tonight, icy stretches and freezing fog. Wintry showers mostly fading away, but rain, sleet and hill snow will edge into the southwest later. Now, imagine if you could get your hands on a copy of the script for the Gavin and Stacey finale, signed by all the stars. Well, one of those stars, Robert Wilfort, also known as Stacey's brother Jason West, has managed to raise nearly £40,000 for a local theatre company by donating a signed copy of his script to a good old-fashioned charity raffle.
Secrets and lies, Gwen! Secrets and lies!
Secrets? You want to talk about secrets? 30 years ago, you two went on a fishing trip that almost tore this family apart. And you still haven't told a single soul what happened.
That's not strictly true, Mum. He did tell someone. And that someone is standing in this room. Isn't he, Dave?
Well, could Jason tell somebody in the studio what really happened on the fishing trip? I'll get to that in just a minute, but please welcome to the studio Robert Wilfort, who, of course, plays Stacey's brother Jason in Gavin and Stacey, and Alice O'Connor, Artistic Director at the Theatre Shed Company. Good evening to you both.
Hello.
Well, how did this come about, Robert? Because, obviously, this will be a prized possession for everybody in the finale of Gavin and Stacey. Was this your only copy?
This was a copy I've had specially printed off.
OK.
When I was on set, I tended to keep my copy on my phone because I was terrified of leaving the script lying around anywhere. I didn't want to be the one who left it in a taxi.
Somebody who leaks the
or in the hotel room and blows
yeah.
everything. So this is a nice, clean... Actually, I've got it here.
Oh, yes,
Do you want to
let's
see
have a look.
it? In a nice Theatre Shed bag.
Wonderful.
Of course, for us, that's the amazing charity we're going to raise money for. But yeah, we have the actual script here, signed by everyone.
Signed by James Corden, Bruce
James
Jones, all the
Corden,
gang.
Rob Brydon, everyone on there. The director's on there. We've got Dave Coates is on there. We've got everyone on there. Fantastic.
So how did this idea come about? What's your connection with the Theatre Shed Company?
Well, they're based locally to me. My daughter has been to some sessions with Shed, and I just thought they were the most amazing charity. They're an inclusive theatre company. I'll let Alice go into the details of all the amazing things that they do. But I really wanted to try and raise money for something that was to do with the arts and allowed young people access to the arts. So I thought if we could raise some money, I thought we'd have a little bit of interest, but the interest has been absolutely incredible.
So, Alice, when Robert got in touch and said, look, I've got this copy of a script of the Gavin and Stacey finale, I think you should raffle it off. What was your reaction?
Yes, let me just create the web page. I think I did that in about 5 minutes flat. We were just thrilled. We knew everybody loves Gavin and Stacey. It's like British television gold. And we knew this was the finale episode. We knew it was going to be big.
And this is the golden script, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and the success of this raffle has just gone beyond our wildest expectations.
So £40,000 raised through that raffle. What will it do for your organisation?
Honestly, this sum of money is a lifeline for us. It's been a really difficult time to make ends meet, and we've been having to scale back quite a lot. So this just means we really can put this straight back into the work we're doing with our members directly. It's going to benefit them. We can offer more bursaries. You know, we've recently moved to a new space and we've got more room to connect with more young people.
Because, Robert, that's so important, isn't it? Gavin and Stacey, a good British comedy and, you know, British cast and, you know, finding the next generation to produce something like this is really important, and that's why you wanted to
Yeah, it's a tough time in the industry. It's really hard for young people to break in. But what's great about Shed is they
it's inclusive for everyone. So you have disabled young people coming, don't you, non-disabled, and they work together and they create their own stuff. And it's just every show of theirs is a delight to watch.
Can I ask you what your favourite part in the finale script is? It doesn't have to be something that you were in. What was your favourite bit?
I did love filming that scene you just watched. Dave coming down the stairs is possibly one of the hardest to keep straight faces I've ever had to do. The reveal of Dave. And all the stuff on the bus when we were heading towards getting Nessa was really good fun.
Yeah, that reveal of Dave's coaches was almost as big as the Sonia reveal, wasn't it? I think I can say that now. I think most people have seen the finale. And you know what would raise a lot of money for charity is by finally revealing the truth about that fishing trip, you know, offering it to the highest bidder.
Yeah, OK, well, let's do it. Let's go. No, I'm afraid that is a secret that's going to go to everyone's graves because nobody really knows what happened. Don't tell anyone.
OK.
No, don't know.
OK. Oh, dear, OK. Well, listen, thank you so much for coming in to talk to us about this. And like you said, it's going to make such a big difference to the Theatre Shed Company. Robert, well done you. And thank you on behalf of everyone watching for such a wonderful finale. I think everybody got the ending that they wanted. It brought a lot of joy at Christmas. It was the only thing we watched in our house on Christmas Day. We all made an appointment to watch that, much like everyone else, a bit like the King's Speech, isn't it? Right, brilliant. Thank you very much. That was the UK Tonight. We'll be back on Monday night at 8. Up next, it's The World with Yelda. Keep. We'll see you next week.